Before we start, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you won't miss any new videos. Imagine walking through the silent halls of an archaeological museum. Beneath your feet lies white marble flooring. To your left stands a white marble statue. To your right, a white marble torso. The light falls evenly, clinically, academically. You think you understand Greece: clarity, harmony, logos, proportion. And then someone flips a switch and the lighting changes. The walls burst into purple and azure. The statue suddenly appears, painted like a carnival mask. Blue hair, red lips, yellow sandals. Sweet gas drifts upward from a crack in the floor, making your head spin as you hear the muttering of the Pythia. Somewhere behind the walls, Spartans vote by roaring. Athenians blacken the face of a thief, and Alexander dies in Babylon without ever seeing Athens again. This is not a second, hidden Greece. This is the first one, the real Greece, later powdered over with white marble 2,000 years after its death. Behind these 15 facts lies one audacious idea. We never truly knew Greece. We knew only its reflection in the mirror of European classicism, pure, strict, lifeless. The purpose of this text is to shatter that mirror and show you the shards, bright, sharp, smelling of wine and olive oil, gas and sweat. Welcome to Hellas as it truly was. Fact 1. Hellenes, who were not Greeks. The story of a self-named suppressed by Rome. What we today call ancient Greece was known to its inhabitants simply as Hellas. The word Greeks, Greeci, was first used by the Romans, and it happened by misunderstanding. When Roman legions encountered colonists from the city of Graea, on the coast of Boeotia, in southern Italy, they extended that name to all speakers of the Hellenic language. The Hellenes themselves proudly traced their name back to the mythical ancestor Hellen, the son of Deucalion, the Greek Noah. Yet there is irony here too. Homer in the Iliad never once calls all Greeks Hellenes. For him, the term referred only to a small Thessalian tribe fighting under Achilles. Unification around this name happened only after the Greco-Persian Wars, when a common identity emerged in opposition to the barbarian East. During the Byzantine period, the word Hellene took on a negative meaning, essentially meaning pagan, and only in the 19th century, during the War of Independence, was it revived as a national symbol. Thus, modern Greeks are the only people in Europe whose self-designation survived linguistic alienation, religious taboo, and a nationalist romantic rebirth. Fact 2. The profile of gods and the wooden pillow. How everyday life shaped beauty standards. The straight line of the forehead flowing into the nose without a pronounced bridge, the so-called Greek profile, was considered a sign of divine origin and aristocratic dignity. But anthropologists and historians of daily life offer not only an aesthetic explanation, but a practical one as well. Ancient Greek homes lacked soft furniture in the modern sense. Greeks slept on hard wooden couches, with headrests made of stone, wood, or bronze. The wealthy could afford pillows stuffed with wool or feathers, but these were rare and expensive. Babies were tightly swaddled and laid in rigid cradles, which, according to paleontologists, contributed to a more elongated skull shape. Unlike many ancient cultures, such as the Anasazi in North America or the Huns, the Greeks consciously avoided artificial skull deformation, considering deliberately flattened skulls a sign of Scythians and other barbarians. Classical sculptors Phidias, Polykleitos, Praxiteles immortalized this idealized morphotype in marble, rejecting models with pronounced indentations around the bridge of the nose. Yet genetic analysis of skeletons from Athenian necropolises reveals enormous diversity in skull shapes. The Greek profile was less a biological reality than a cultural construct. The ideal face the Hellenes wished to resemble, though they often did not in reality. Fact 3. The wine-dark sea and the invisible blue. How the absence of a word changes perception. This fact has become a classic example in linguistics, but its depth is revealed only in the details. When Homer writes of the wine-dark sea oinops pontos, he is not using metaphor. To him, the sea genuinely resembled the color of red wine. He calls the sky bronze or iron, sheep's wool purple, and honey green. Neither the Iliad nor the Odyssey contains a single word we would translate as blue. British politician and philologist William Gladstone devoted an entire study to this phenomenon in 1858. He counted Homer's use of colors. Black appears around 170 times, white about 100, red 15, yellow and green around 10 each, and blue 0. Experiments with isolated modern tribes, such as the Nambiquara in Brazil, showed that people without a word for blue genuinely struggle to distinguish it from green. But technology is the key. Stable blue pigment, Egyptian blue, a calcium copper silicate, was invented in Egypt around 2200 BCE, but remained incredibly expensive because it required imported lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. Classical Greeks preferred bright, cheap, and accessible red cinnabar and black, burned bone pigment. When blue eventually entered Hellas alongside Egyptian ceramics, it was called Egyptian black simply because no other category existed. The Byzantine word galanos, from gala, milk, meaning cloudy whitish, appeared only in the 6th century, while the modern Greek ble derives from the Latin blavis, yellowish gray, the color of spoiled flesh. Thus, a color without a name existed trapped among other shades for nearly 2,000 years. Fact 4. A sacrificial bull once a year, the Greek diet without meat. If you attended a feast in classical Athens, do not expect kebabs and steaks. The average Athenian, even a wealthy one, saw meat on the table only once or twice a month, while the poor ate it exclusively during major religious festivals. Why? Economics. Rocky, dry Attica had little pastureland, and there was not enough fodder to sustain cattle year-round. Meat was primarily a ritual product. Animals were slaughtered only as offerings to the gods, after which the meat was distributed among ceremony participants. In the Iliad, heroes constantly roast oxen precisely because the act symbolizes their bond with immortals. Archaeozoological analysis of waste from Athenian wells shows that cattle bones account for less than 5% of all remains, and 90% of them bear marks of ceremonial slaughter. The diet instead centered on barley, used for thick porridge called maza, olives, onions, garlic, goat cheese, and fish in coastal regions. Fish, however, was expensive. Only the rich could afford large tuna, while ordinary people caught small mullet. The cheapest and most nutritious food turned out to be beans, lupulos, which were even dedicated to Apollo. Yet the Pythagoreans avoided beans under threat of death. The explanation was bizarre. Pythagoras claimed beans contained the souls of the dead because their hollow stems served as channels for reincarnation. A more practical reason may have been that beans caused flatulence, interfering with meditation, and were also used in voting. White beans for yes, black for no. So eating them symbolically destroyed civic choice. In any case, the Greek diet was nearly vegetarian, and the myth of meat-eating Greeks was largely created by Romans astonished by Spartan austerity. Fact 5. The chasm of Caidas. How Spartans really dealt with weak children. The bloody myth of Sparta remains one of the most enduring in Western culture. According to Plutarch's Life of Lycurgus, Spartan newborns were brought before elders, who inspected them and, if they found them weak, ugly, or sickly, ordered them thrown into the chasm of Caidas near Mount Taygetus. Archaeologists excavated this ravine in the 19th and 20th centuries and found hundreds of skeletons of adult men showing signs of violent death: crushed skulls, broken ribs, spear wounds. Children's bones were almost non-existent and dated mainly to periods of famine or epidemic. So what really happened? The Spartan educational system, agoge, was indeed harsh. Boys were removed from their families at age 7, lived in barracks, endured hunger, beatings, and theft training. But it was not weak infants who were killed. It was those who failed later trials of adulthood. The inspection of newborns was most likely a ritual check for hereditary diseases and physical deformities that would hinder service in the phalanx. Rejection of a child was framed not as murder, but as exposure, abandonment in the mountains, where helots might rescue and raise the child as a slave. Historians believe the Kaidas myth originated among Roman writers of the 1st century BCE, who sought in Sparta justification for their own brutality. Plutarch, writing 5 centuries after Sparta's peak, relied on embellished oral legends. Thus, the Spartan method was no bloodier than practices of many ancient cultures, and certainly less cruel than contemporary Roman spectacles. Fact 6. Alexander, who barely saw Greece. Philip II, father of Alexander, once joked, "Greece is a deer we Macedonians raised only to hunt ourselves." Behind the joke lay bitter truth. Alexander the Great was born in 356 BCE in Pella, capital of the Macedonian kingdom. To Athenians and Spartans of the classical era, Macedonians were semi-barbarians. They spoke a Greek dialect with a strong Thracian accent, drank unmixed wine, wore long hair, and their kings did not honor the Olympian gods in the same manner as southern Greeks. When Alexander became king at age 20, he spent only around 18 months in Greece proper south of Thermopylae. He crushed Thebes, destroyed the city except for temples and the house of poet Pindar, confirmed his hegemonic status at Corinth, and departed for Asia. He never returned. He visited Athens only once in passing and never conquered Sparta. During 11 years of campaigns, he traveled from the Nile to the Indus, founded more than 20 Alexandrias, married the Bactrian princess Roxana and Persian princess Statira, dressed in Persian fashion, and demanded proskynesis, the kissing of his feet, which Greeks considered sacrilegious. He died in Babylon in 323 BCE at age 32, without seeing his homeland for 13 years. Ironically, precisely because of this distance, he became a universal hero. Romans, Byzantines, and later European romantics created the image of the Greek conqueror, though Greeks themselves often viewed him as foreign during his lifetime. Only in the Hellenistic period was Alexander canonized as a national hero. After his death. Fact 7. Shouting, trumpeting, and painting, the strange disciplines of the Olympic Games. Modern Olympism includes 32 sports, from running to skateboarding. Ancient Olympic Games, 776 BCE, 393 CE, featured disciplines that today would seem bizarre. One famous lost discipline involved heralds and trumpeters. Contestants competed in loudly and clearly announcing victors' names or playing attack signals on long bronze trumpets. Winners earned the right to announce future Olympic results. Another exotic event was the Apobates race. A warrior in full armor drove a 4-horse chariot, leapt off at full speed, ran alongside it, then jumped back aboard. Judges evaluated grace and speed. The bloodiest discipline was pankration, a combination of wrestling and boxing with only 2 prohibitions: no eye gouging and no biting. In 564 BCE, wrestler Aricion of Phegalia was being strangled in a hold, but managed to dislocate his opponent's toe. The opponent screamed and surrendered, and judges awarded victory to Aricion, who had already suffocated to death. A statue was erected in his honor. The most scandalous incident involved Callippos of Athens in 332 BCE, who bribed opponents in pankration. Athens refused to pay the imposed fine, and Olympic judges punished the entire polis with a 6,000 drachma penalty. Athens erected 6 bronze statues of Zeus in shame, and the resulting boycott kept Athenians away from the games for 30 years. Fact 8. The Gordian knot, an engineering solution instead of magic. The phrase "to cut the Gordian knot" became a metaphor for radical solutions. Yet historically, the Gordian knot was not a complicated tangle of ropes. In 333 BCE, Alexander arrived at Gordium, ancient capital of Phrygia. Inside Zeus's temple stood a wagon fastened to a pole by a complex knot made of cornel bark. The oracle declared that whoever untied it would rule Asia. Ancient sources disagree. Aristobulus claimed Alexander removed the peg holding the yoke, causing the rope to fall apart naturally. Arrian gives the famous sword version. Modern historians of technology note that the Greek term gordios halmos referred not to a common knot, but to a specialized tension not used in navigation. Such knots were not meant to be untied. Moisture and pressure fused the bark into a solid mass. They were either cut or dismantled by removing the fastening pin. Alexander, educated by Aristotle, likely understood this. His brilliant solution may simply have been technical knowledge. He did not try to untie the impossible, but used the only workable method. The later sword miracle legend romanticized him as a man unafraid to break rules. Fact 9. The Delphic gas factory, drugs, and the geology of prophecy. Delphi was considered the navel of the world, the place where two eagles released by Zeus supposedly met. The Pythia, the prophetic priestess, sat above a crack in the earth, inhaled vapors, entered trance states, and muttered incoherently. Priests translated her words into poetic hexameter regarded as Apollo's prophecy. For centuries, this was dismissed as myth. But from 1996 to 2001, an international geological team discovered two intersecting fault lines beneath Apollo's temple. Ethylene gas still seeps from them today. In low doses, the sweet-smelling gas induces euphoria, detachment, and loss of self-control. In higher doses, hallucinations and unconsciousness. Chemical analysis of cups found in the Pythia's chamber revealed traces of laurel compounds and tetrahydrocannabinol from cannabis, suggesting ritual smoke mixtures. The Pythia may also have chewed laurel leaves, which contain compounds capable of producing hallucinations. In this sense, the Delphic oracle was less mystical than technological. Priests understood the effects of the gas, amplified them with plants, and transformed chaotic utterances into divine authority. Yet this did not diminish Delphi's influence. For 12 centuries, it remained the most respected advisory center in the Mediterranean. Fact 10. Democracy born from the hoplite formation. How the shield became a ballot box. Textbooks say Cleisthenes introduced democracy in Athens in 508/507 BC through political reforms. But the roots of democracy lay on the battlefield. 2 centuries earlier, Greek warfare shifted from aristocratic cavalry to hoplite phalanxes. Hoplites were citizens wealthy enough to buy a shield, spear, helmet, and armor. In formation, each hoplite protected the man to his left, while depending on the shield of the man to his right. This mutual dependence created a revolutionary mentality. Decisions about attacking or retreating were made collectively through shouting and consensus. Commanders were often chosen by acclamation. This practice later moved into the ecclesia, the people's assembly. Even the word democratia combines demos, people, with kratos, not government in the legal sense, but raw physical power. Sparta, often labeled an oligarchy, also voted by shouting because it suited military life. Secret voting with pottery shards ostracism, introduced around 487 BCE, resembled a military tribunal among comrades. Democracy, therefore, was not an abstract philosophical invention, but a direct extension of tactical necessity. The phalanx taught Greeks that every voice mattered because everyone's survival depended on it. Fact 11. Atavia and ink, punishments that erased identity. The death of Socrates by hemlock was relatively humane. But Athens also practiced punishments aimed not at the body, but at social annihilation. One of the harshest was atavia, a curse erasing a person's name. Citizens convicted of treason or sacrilege had their names removed from all public records. Their homes were demolished, and shame markers erected in their place. Property was confiscated, with a quarter awarded to informers. Their children lost civic rights. They could not marry freely, vote, or own land. This was considered worse than death. The condemned became socially non-existent. Another punishment, the Delian penalty, involved abandoning criminals on the island of Delos during sacred months, when birth and death were forbidden there. Victims died slowly from thirst and starvation, while technically avoiding murder within sacred boundaries. One of the most horrifying punishments targeted thieves who stole sacred oil from Parthenon amphorae. Offenders were shaved bald, covered in a black mixture of soot, resin, and olive oil, paraded through the agora for 3 days, mocked and abused by citizens, and only afterward executed. Many suspects reportedly confessed under torture simply to avoid the humiliation of being blackened. Fact 12. Santorini, the volcano that destroyed the Minoans and created Atlantis. Around 1600 BCE, the island of Thera, modern Santorini, experienced an eruption that transformed Mediterranean history. The explosion ejected roughly 30 cubic kilometers of ash, 10 times more powerful than Krakatoa in 1883. The eruption obliterated the island center, leaving today's horseshoe-shaped caldera. Tsunami waves 20 to 35 meters high struck Crete within 70 minutes. Minoan coastal settlements were completely destroyed, while ash covered farmland and caused famine for years. The Minoan civilization, dominant in the Aegean since 2000 BCE, never fully recovered. 50 years later, it was conquered by Mycenaean Greeks, who adopted Minoan writing, religion, and technologies. More than a millennium later, Plato heard Egyptian stories about a great island swallowed by the sea in a single day and night. Combining memories of Thera, earthquakes, and Egyptian myths, he created Atlantis, a political allegory about an ideal state ruined by arrogance. Santorini itself was not Atlantis, but the catastrophe opened the way for the rise of Hellenic Greece. Fact 13. Painted statues. How the Renaissance bleached antiquity. In 2010, museums in Munich, Copenhagen, and Los Angeles hosted the groundbreaking exhibition Gods in Color. It presented replicas of classical statues painted according to ultraviolet and infrared analysis, and audiences were shocked. Greek statues were never white. Polychromy, the use of bright paint, was standard throughout ancient sculpture and architecture. Barbarians were considered those who left marble bare. Analysis of statues from the Athenian Acropolis revealed dark blue hair with red strands, green eyes with crystal inlays, red lips, and brightly patterned garments. Delos marble lions were painted like leopards. The Parthenon friezes were color blue, red, gold, and green. Bronze statues often featured silver and copper inlaid eyes. Why then do we imagine antiquity as white marble? First, centuries erased the pigments. Second, the 18th century German art historian Johann Winckelmann built the neoclassical ideal of noble simplicity and calm grandeur from bleached ruins. Ignoring surviving traces of paint in Pompeii, he declared, "The whiter the body, the more beautiful it is." This deeply biased aesthetic shaped Europe's image of Greece for 250 years. Modern museums increasingly display colorful reconstructions, though many visitors still complain they look cheap. Archaeologists answer, ancient Greece was bright, loud, colorful, and therefore far more alive. Fact 14. Pants as barbarian clothing. How a piece of fabric divided the world. Greek historian Herodotus described the Scythians with disgust. They wore trousers and pointed hats. In the Greek world, pants were taboo. Male citizens wore chitons and cloaks, while athletes trained completely naked in gymnasiums. Trousers were associated with horse-riding peoples: Persians, Scythians, Thracians, Celts, who needed protection from cold and friction. Greeks saw horseback culture as either barbaric or inferior. The true warrior fought in the hoplite phalanx. Aristotle even claimed barbarians differed from Greeks because they wore trousers and tolerated tyranny. Ironically, Romans initially shocked Greeks with their own short pants, yet later Roman soldiers adopted long Celtic-style brachy, and Greeks under Roman rule gradually adopted trousers as well. Sparta remained one of the last holdouts of bare-legged masculinity, where boys endured winter wearing only cloaks. When a Roman traveler asked Spartan whether they felt cold, he replied, "Real men do not feel cold. Only barbarians hide their legs in sacks." Today, modern Greeks wear trousers like all Europeans, while ceremonial guards in Athens preserve a stylized skirt-like uniform recalling ancient clothing traditions. Fact 15. 3 languages in 150 years. Greece and the war over a letter. The history of the Greek language in the 19th and 20th centuries became a drama filled with riots and bloodshed. After Greece gained independence in 1830 following 4 centuries of Ottoman rule, the new elite faced a question: what language should the nation speak? Ordinary people used Demotic Greek, a living language shaped by centuries of evolution and foreign influences. Intellectuals, inspired by antiquity, considered Demotic vulgar and promoted Katharavousa, purified language, an artificial form combining ancient grammar with modern vocabulary. In 1834, King Otto I declared Katharavousa the official language of the state. Courts, parliament, and the military all operated in an archaic grammar nearly impossible for common citizens. The crisis peaked in 1901 when Alexandros Pallas published a Demotic translation of the New Testament. Conservative students, clergy, and military groups launched violent riots, known as the Evangelica. People died, the government collapsed, and the translator fled abroad. Demotic was allowed only in literature, while banned from schools and churches. In 1917, Prime Minister Eleftherios Venizelos attempted to introduce Demotic into primary education, triggering another political crisis. During the Greek Civil War, language even became a marker of political alignment. Finally, in 1976, after the fall of the military junta, Demotic Greek became the sole official language. Ancient grammatical forms were abolished, but traces of Katharavousa remain even today. Greece thus became the only European country to change its state language twice within 150 years, and both transitions resulted in violence. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like. Write in the comments which country you want to see next, and what facts you're most curious about. See you in the next episode.